Darth Vader, probably the most badass villain ever, and one of the most famous characters in all of cinema history. Ask your great-great-grandpa, he'd probably know who he is. In this video, we're diving deep into Darth Vader's lore, all the secrets and hidden stuff you don't see in the movies. Trust me, there's so much to cover that I wish we could get a whole Vader show just for this. So sit back, grab a snack, and let the galaxy fade around you. Now, let's begin. Alright, so let's start at the very beginning. We have to talk about how this whole story even began, and I'm talking about how Anakin Skywalker was born, because this is, no joke, one of the biggest mysteries in the entire galaxy. It's the Big Bang of the Skywalker saga, and it's shrouded in so much ambiguity that we're still pulling at the threads decades later. So the story, as we know it from Shmi Skywalker, is pretty straightforward, but also utterly bizarre in context. She's a slave on Tatooine, a good person dealt a terrible hand in life, and one day she's just pregnant. She literally says he was a virgin birth. She's completely calm about it too, which always struck me as interesting. She's not confused or terrified. She presents it as a simple, miraculous fact. There was no father. I carried him, I gave birth, I raised him. Now, in our world, that's a concept we understand from a religious context. In the Star Wars galaxy, it's something else. It's a medical and force-related impossibility that has the Jedi Council totally baffled when Qui-Gon Jinn shows up with this kid. His midichlorian count is over 20,000, which is higher than Master Yoda's. This is where the theories kick in, and they are wild. The first big one, the one that seems almost too perfect, involves Darth Plagueis. You know, the guy Palpatine tells Anakin about in the Opera House? The Sith Lord, who was so powerful and so wise, he could use the Force to influence the midichlorians. Palpatine says Plagueis could actually keep the people he cared about from dying. So the theory goes that Plagueis and his apprentice, Palpatine, were experimenting. They were pushing the boundaries of the dark side, trying to create life through the Force, to bend it to their will in a way no one ever had. They wanted to conquer death itself, which is the ultimate goal of the Sith. And in doing so, they accidentally, or maybe on purpose, created Anakin Skywalker. Think about the timeline. The approximate year of Anakin's birth lines up perfectly with the height of Plagueis' and Sidious's experiments. They reached out through the Force and manipulated the midichlorians within Shmi to conceive this child. The sheer poetic tragedy of it is off the charts. It also adds a horrifying layer to Palpatine's relationship with Anakin. He's almost a father, a dark, twisted, evil father who sees Anakin as his property. He says as much in Revenge of the Sith. I have been every voice you have ever heard inside your head. That line hits way differently if he literally orchestrated your very existence. But here's the counterpoint, and it's a strong one. The Force tends to have a will of its own. It's almost a character, a living energy field that seeks harmony. So another theory, and this is the one I personally lean towards, is that the Force itself created Anakin. Think about the state of the galaxy around the time he was conceived. The Sith are lurking in the shadows, growing stronger, tipping the scales so far towards the dark side that the galaxy is practically groaning under the weight. The Force isn't balanced at all. It's a seesaw, with a Sith Lord sitting on one end, and a bunch of complacent, dogmatic Jedi on the other. The dark side is a cancer, and it's metastasizing, so the Force, in its own inscrutable way, decides to course correct. It decides to create the ultimate counterweight. It conceives a being of itself to come in and restore balance. Now, a huge misconception is that balance means all light side. That's not it. Balance means the absence of the corrupting, dominating influence of the dark side. The light side is balance. The dark side is like a parasite, unbalancing a host. So this being, Anakin, is born to wipe the slate clean. Not to make everything sunshine and rainbows, but to literally balance the scales. And that means destroying both the overly dominant Sith and the stagnant Jedi Order to make way for something new. Anakin is less a person in this view, and more a natural disaster waiting to happen. A hurricane of destiny, conjured by the universe itself to clean house. He's the Force's immune system, responding to a massive infection. And the Plagueis theory? That might have been the catalyst. Maybe the Sith's attempt to create life was so arrogant, so disruptive, such a violent rape of the natural order, that it was the final straw. It was the event that made the Force go, okay, that's it, you've crossed a line, we're doing this. So the Sith might have been messing with the engine, and the Force responded by building a whole new car to run them over. In this version, Plagueis and Sidious didn't create Anakin. They provoked the Force into creating him. They kicked a beehive, and the bees responded by building a bigger, angrier bee. There's even some incredible evidence from the dialogue itself. In the novelization of Revenge of the Sith, which is honestly a masterpiece, there's a scene where Mace Windu is about to arrest Palpatine. He says, "We're not going to kill you. We know you've been trained to use the dark side. We know you've been behind the creation of the clone army." And then he says something absolutely chilling. He says, "And we suspect you had something to do with the creation of Anakin Skywalker." Let that sink in. The Jedi Council, the most cautious, skeptical group in the galaxy, had a running theory that the Sith Lord they'd been hunting might have literally built their so-called Chosen One. That's not some fan theory, that's right there in the text. They knew something was up. The pieces didn't fit. A fatherless child of the Force, appearing out of nowhere, at the exact moment the Sith return? That's too big a coincidence for even the Jedi to ignore. But then you have George Lucas's own word on it. In interviews, he's always maintained that Anakin was created by the Force. He's the Christ-like figure, a divine intervention. Lucas was weaving a mythological tapestry, and in mythology, the hero often has a mysterious, divine origin. So from the creator's perspective, the answer is pretty clear. The Force did it. Yet, the genius of the storytelling is that the characters in the universe don't know that. The ambiguity is what fuels so much of the drama. For Palpatine, he might believe he had a hand in it, and that belief allows him to feel ownership over Anakin. For the Jedi, their suspicion creates a constant, underlying tension that prevents them from ever fully trusting their own prophesied savior. And for Anakin himself, he's trapped in the middle. This identity crisis is at the very heart of his character. There's even a third, more obscure theory that's worth mentioning, because it's so out there. Some deep lore enthusiasts point to the concept of the Force Wound, or Echo, created by the massive dark side energy unleashed during the Sith massacre on the planet Malachor. The idea is that such a huge, traumatic event in the Force could have reverberated through time and space, and somehow manifested a reaction. It's a stretch, but it's a cool idea that ties into the ancient Sith and shows how their past atrocities could have long-term consequences they never foresaw. So which is it? Was he a Sith experiment gone wrong, or a divine act of creation by the Force? The beautiful, frustrating, and awesome thing is that the story allows for both interpretations. That's the foundation of everything. It's the first domino. And once it tips, it sets off a chain reaction that doesn't stop until the Emperor is dead and the galaxy is free. And it all begins with a mystery we're still arguing about. And that's why the lore is so amazing. It gives you these deep, philosophical questions wrapped up in a story about space wizards and laser swords. So we've talked about how Anakin got here, but now we have to ask the next logical question. What was this kid actually capable of? What was the ceiling for the guy literally born from the Force itself? Because the thing that sometimes gets lost in the Vader suit, and the breathing and the terror, Anakin Skywalker, had he not gotten Crispy Nugget on Mustafar, was supposed to be the most powerful, Force-sensitive being to ever exist. Full stop, no debate. This isn't fanboy exaggeration. It's stated fact within the universe. He wasn't one of the most powerful. He was meant to be the guy, the final boss of Force potential. Now, I know midichlorians are a touchy subject for some fans, but for our purposes, they're just the unit of measurement. They're the power grid, and Anakin's grid was off the charts. George Lucas himself confirmed that Anakin's potential, his peak midichlorian count, was literally over twice that of Yoda. Yoda, the little green dude who's been training Jedi for 800 years, who can lift an entire X-Wing out of a swamp without breaking a sweat, was operating at less than half the capacity that a fully realised Anakin Skywalker would have. It's like comparing a really powerful sports car to a Saturn V rocket. Both are impressive, but one is designed for a completely different scale of operation. Yoda is a master of finesse, of control, of using every single ounce of his power with perfect efficiency. But Anakin, his potential was raw, universe-altering power. He wouldn't lift an X-Wing. He could probably have held a Star Destroyer in the sky if he'd really tapped into it. So what would that have looked like? A mature, balanced Anakin Skywalker, never turned by Palpatine, mastering both his power and his emotions? It's almost impossible to imagine, because it's so far beyond what we've seen anyone else do. We're talking about a guy who could potentially mediate the will of the Force on a galactic scale. His mere presence might have been enough to calm planetary storms or heal deep wounds in the fabric of space itself. Dramatic? Maybe. But when your dad is literally the Force, you get to have a pretty dramatic resume. Now, let's get into the fun part, comparisons. How does this theoretical max power Anakin stack up against the legends? First, let's take his contemporaries, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, Obi-Wan is the ultimate example of a master who wins through discipline, technique, and sheer tactical brilliance. He's not the most powerful, but he's arguably the most effective duelist of his era. And he beat Anakin on Mustafar. But that's the key. He beat a conflicted, emotionally shattered, dark side-fueled Anakin who was leaking power everywhere with his rage. A balanced, focused Anakin? That's a completely different fight. Obi-Wan's flawless defense, Soresu, is designed to outlast an opponent. But how do you outlast a hurricane? You can't. Anakin's raw power and speed would have eventually overwhelmed any defense. Obi-Wan wins through exploiting Anakin's instability. Against a stable Anakin, it's a shutout. Next, Mace Windu. Now, Mace is a beast. He's maybe the greatest duelist the Jedi Order ever produced. His mastery of Vapid, a form that channels his own inner darkness and his opponents back at them, is literally the perfect weapon against a dark side user. He beat Palpatine fair and square in a lightsaber duel. But again, that's the thing. Vapid is a counter-punching style. It feasts on darkness. What does it do against someone who isn't using the dark side? Against someone who is a pure vessel of the balanced force? Mace's biggest weapon is neutralized. You're left with one of the greatest Jedi Masters of all time against a being whose connection to the Force is fundamentally different, on a higher order of magnitude. It's a legendary fight, for sure. But Anakin's sheer, overwhelming power gives him the edge. It's like a master swordsman going up against someone who can also control gravity, time, and the very ground under their feet. Then there's Yoda. Yoda's strength isn't in brute force. It's in his sublime, centuries-honed connection to the Force. His fight with Palpatine in the Senate chamber is less a duel and more a clash of metaphysical titans. They're hurling Force lightning and catching Senate pods like they're tennis balls. It's insane, and Yoda loses. Now, take Anakin's potential, double it, then double it again. That's what Palpatine was so desperate to acquire. A balanced Anakin wouldn't just beat Palpatine, he'd overwhelm him. But let's go back, way back into the ancient legends. How would our boy Annie stack up against the likes of Revan, Nihilus, Bane, or even the Sith Emperor Darth Vader? Revan is the fan favourite, the ultimate Grey Jedi poster child. A strategic genius, a master of both the light and dark who reshaped the galaxy. His power is immense, but Revan's story is one of achieving power through knowledge, through exploration, through mastering both sides. His power was earned. Anakin's power was innate. It was baked into his very DNA from birth. It's the difference between a brilliant, self-made billionaire and someone who was born on a planet made of solid gold. Revan had to work for every ounce of his power. In a straight-up conflict, Revan's versatility and cunning would make it a fascinating battle, but he's ultimately playing a different game. Anakin's raw, fundamental power would be like bringing a nuclear warhead to a knife fight. Then there's Vitiate, or Valkorion. Now, this is a contender. The Sith Emperor, who consumed entire planets to fuel his own immortality, who lived for over 1,000 years, whose power was so profound he could dominate the minds of billions. This is the scale we're talking about. Vitiate represents the absolute peak of what a dark side user can achieve through millennia of accumulation, sacrifice, and sheer evil. He is a black hole of power. A balanced Anakin represents something else entirely. Not accumulated power, but pure power. It's the difference between a reservoir that's been slowly filled over centuries and the endless, raging ocean. Could Vitiate ancient, accumulated might withstand the living embodiment of the Force's will? It's the ultimate clash of styles. My money is on the ocean eventually washing the reservoir away. Vitiate's power is stolen, parasitic. Anakin's is natural, organic. In the end, the real thing usually wins. This is the tragic part of the whole story. We never got to see this. We got glimpses. We saw the flashes of insane potential. The pod racing? A human shouldn't be able to do that. It's his subconscious Force connection, giving him reflexes no one else has. At 9 years old, with zero training, he accidentally jumps into a starfighter and becomes the only human to ever win the Boon to Eve Classic. Then he immediately hops into a Naboo fighter and destroys a Trade Federation control ship by accident. It's ridiculous. As a teenager, he's already rivaling Obi-Wan. He's arrogant, he's reckless, but the talent is blinding. He invents new lightsaber techniques on the fly. Next is Darth Bane, the creator of the Rule of Two. Bane was a juggernaut, a warlord who could rip through Jedi like paper. His raw strength and skill in combat were legendary. But when you put him next to an unbroken Anakin, Bane starts to look more like a stepping stone. Anakin's dueling skill, speed and force power would have outclassed him in almost every way. Bane revolutionized the Sith by being clever, but in terms of one-on-one strength, Anakin at full potential would have ended him. Now let's bring in Darth Plagueis, Sidious's master. Plagueis wasn't really known for combat. His obsession was with bending life and death itself. Some say he discovered secrets of immortality through the Force. That's scary, sure. But immortality means nothing if you can't survive a duel. Against Anakin, Plagueis' research wouldn't save him. The Chosen One's raw force potential would have outclassed any trick Plagueis had up his sleeve. If Plagueis represented knowledge, Anakin represented raw destiny, and destiny doesn't play fair. Darth Sidious. Palpatine was the ultimate schemer. Not only powerful, but the most dangerous manipulator the Sith ever produced. In the movies, Anakin was already on track to outshine him. Even George Lucas flat out said Anakin was destined to be twice as strong as Sidious. Without the injuries, Anakin's lightsaber skills, reflexes, and force abilities would have been far beyond anything Sidious could counter. Sure, Palpatine had his tricks, lightning, cunning, political control, but against Anakin at his prime, the Emperor would have been overthrown, no question. It's no exaggeration to say that an unbroken Anakin would have fulfilled the prophecy much earlier by simply overpowering his master. Throw in legends like Malgus, Malak, Exarchon, all iconic Sith in their own right. Each one brought something terrifying. Malgus with his relentless brutality, Malak with his sheer domination, Exarchon with his mastery of ancient Force techniques. But even these legends, stacked together, would fall short against an unbroken Anakin. His ceiling was just higher. He had a gear that nobody else could reach. So where does this leave us? Full potential Anakin Skywalker, the version we never got to see, was the ultimate trump card. Against Sidious, he wins. Against Bane, he wins. Against Plagueis, he wins. Against Nihilus or Vitiate, he might actually survive where no one else could. And then, of course, he becomes Darth Vader. And this is the biggest misconception people have. They see Vader as this ultimate badass, which he is, but they don't realize he's a crippled version of what Anakin was supposed to be. And the craziest part? Even as this crippled half-machine version of himself, he's still one of the most terrifyingly powerful beings in the galaxy. He's still able to force choke Admirians from across a star system. He can rip starfighters out of the sky. He can walk through a hail of blaster fire without a scratch. He's a nightmare. This is him operating at a fraction of his capacity. It's like if you took a Formula One car, replaced its engine with a lawnmower motor, put it on square wheels, and it was still winning races. That's how absurd Anakin's innate potential was. So, the what if is the most heartbreaking thing in Star Wars. What if he hadn't fallen? What if he had matured under Obi-Wan's guidance, learned control from Yoda, and truly grown into his role as the Chosen One? The Emperor would have been a non-issue. The Clone Wars might have ended in a day. He wouldn't have brought balance by destroying both sides. He might have actually reformed the Jedi Order, creating a new, healthier connection to the Force that prevented the rise of the Sith altogether. He would have been a galactic-scale peacemaker, a teacher, a guardian. So, we talked about the prophecy earlier, but we only scratched the surface. Alright, let's get into it. The whole reason Qui-Gon Jinn stuck his neck out for a slave kid on Tatooine, the thing that made the Jedi Council so nervous, and the central idea that Anakin's entire tragic life revolves around. We need to unpack this carefully, because it's been twisted, misinterpreted, and argued about for centuries, both in our world and in the galaxy far, far away. So what exactly is the prophecy of the Chosen One? If you walked into the Jedi archives on Coruscant and asked the official text carved on an ancient Kyber crystal tablet or something, supposedly goes like this: "A chosen one shall come, born of no father, and through him will ultimate balance in the Force be restored." That's the core of it. Short, simple, and incredibly, frustratingly vague. The Chosen One was supposed to be a galactic exterminator, who would wipe out their ancient enemies and usher in a new golden age for the Jedi. But that's not how the Force works. We talked about that earlier. Now, let's talk origins. Where did this prophecy even come from? It's ancient. We're talking thousands of years before the Skywalker saga, likely from a group of Force philosophers who had a much more nuanced understanding of the Force's nature. Some sources point to the Jedi Order of that deep past, while others suggest it might have originated with even older groups, like the Wills, those mysterious beings who are basically the chroniclers of the universe. They saw the Force not as a tool to be used, but as a living energy that required harmony. They likely foresaw a time when the Sith, with their addictive and destructive use of the dark side, would grow so powerful that they would threaten the very fabric of existence. The prophecy was their vision of the mechanism for correction. But prophecies are tricky things. They're never straightforward. They're more of a warning or a promise of a possibility, not a guaranteed instruction manual. They require interpretation, and that's where everyone messed up. Enter Anakin Skywalker. He fits the first part of the prophecy perfectly. Born of no father, check. He has a midichlorian count, higher than any Jedi in history, check. He must be the guy, but the pressure of the rising dark side and the outbreak of the Clone Wars makes the Jedi desperate. They need a hero, so they accept him, but with a huge amount of side-eye. They never truly trust him because they never truly understood the prophecy he was supposed to fulfill. Anakin himself is crushed under the weight of this prophecy. He's told from the moment he's discovered that he's this destined savior. That's a lot for a little kid, and then for an arrogant teenager, and then for a troubled young man to handle. He feels he has to be the best, he has to be powerful, he has to live up to this impossible standard, and when he feels he's failing, when he has nightmares about his wife dying, the prophecy becomes a trap. Palpatine preys on this perfectly. This leads to the ultimate irony. The one meant to destroy the Sith becomes one. The chosen one becomes the very thing he was supposed to eliminate. For all intents and purposes, it looks like the prophecy was dead wrong. It failed. The Jedi who are skeptical feel vindicated, and the Order is destroyed. It's the biggest failure of a prophecy imaginable. But was it? This is the beautiful part. The prophecy was never about a person doing a single good thing. It was about a process, a painful, brutal, decades-long process of correction. Let's fast forward. Darth Vader, the Sith Lord, is the dominant half of Anakin Skywalker for over 20 years. He helps the Empire rule the galaxy with an iron fist. He hunts down the last of the Jedi. He is the embodiment of the imbalance. But then, Luke Skywalker enters the picture. Luke doesn't see a monster. He sees the good man that was his father, the man trapped inside the machine. He believes in that man. He believes in the good in him. In the throne room on the second Death Star, the final act plays out, and in that moment, Anakin Skywalker makes a choice. He picks up the Emperor and throws him down a reactor shaft, killing him and destroying the Sith. Through him, ultimate balance in the Force is restored. It just happened 23 years later than everyone expected, and in the most unexpected way possible. Anakin didn't bring balance as a glorious Jedi Knight. He brought it as a broken, redeemed Sith Lord who sacrificed himself to save his son. He fulfilled the prophecy not by being a perfect hero, but by being a flawed human being who finally made the right choice. Okay, let's shift gears. Now we have to talk about the machine, the prison, the thing that turned the charismatic, powerful Anakin Skywalker into the walking, breathing engine of fear we know as Darth Vader. This is one of the most fascinating and deliberately cruel pieces of technology in all of sci-fi, and every single detail of it tells a story about the Sith and the man trapped inside. So, picture the scene. Mustafar. Anakin is less a man and more a piece of overcooked meat. He's lost all his limbs, his lungs are scorched, his body is basically destroyed. He should be dead, but Palpatine feels him screaming in the Force across the galaxy, and he gets there just in time. This is crucial. Palpatine doesn't save him out of kindness. This is a Sith Lord acquiring his most powerful tool and making damn sure it can never be used against him. The suit isn't built for comfort, it's not built for efficiency. It's built for three very specific Sith purposes: survival, control, and agony. Let's break that down. First, survival. Obviously, it has to keep him alive. This is a full life support system. The most famous part is the respiratory system. His lungs are toast, so the suit has to breathe for him. That iconic rhythmic breath isn't just for show. It's a mechanical respirator forcing air in and out of his ruined body. But it's a bare minimum system. It doesn't give him easy, full breaths. It's a constant, laboured struggle. The face mask? It's a complex respiratory intake and filter system. Processing air because his own body can't. He has feeding tubes, nutrient dispensers, catheters, the whole nasty suite of medical tech needed to keep a corpse animated. But here's where the Sith design philosophy kicks in. Palpatine and his engineers didn't use the best, most comfortable technology available to the galaxy. Oh no, that would be too kind. They used what was on hand. This is a key point. A lot of the suit is built from off-the-shelf standardized cybernetic parts and Old Republic tech. Some of it even repurposed from the Lambda-class shuttles you see Imperial officers flying around in. Why? 2 reasons. First, speed. Palpatine needed his new enforcer up and running immediately to help cement his new empire. Second, and more importantly, it's a constant reminder to Vader that he is a thing, a tool, a machine built from spare parts. He's not a man anymore. He's a project, assembled for a purpose. Now let's get to the real evil genius of the suit, the constant agony. Every single part of this armor is designed to cause him unending pain. The cybernetic limbs, they're incredibly powerful, but they're also crude and lack fine tolerance neural interfaces. This means he feels every movement as a jarring, grinding sensation. There's no smooth, natural motion. It's all pistons and servos, and he feels all of it. The connectors where his flesh meets the machine, they're points of constant inflamed pain. The suit itself is heavy, incredibly so. It weighs hundreds of pounds. He's carrying that weight on his burned, scarred body every second of every day. The inside of the helmet is lined with needles that press into his scalp, a constant prickling reminder of his state. And the pain isn't a bug. Pain fuels the dark side. Anger, hatred, suffering. This is the energy a Sith draws upon. Palpatine designed Vader's suit to be a perpetual pain engine, ensuring that his apprentice would always have a massive, readily available source of dark side power. Vader's very existence is torture, and that torture is what makes him strong. Or at least, that's the theory. It also ensures he's always angry, always on edge, always in a state of suffering that makes him easier to manipulate. A comfortable, content Vader might start thinking for himself. A Vader in constant blinding pain is a Vader who is focused on that pain and on the rage it produces. This leads us to the third purpose, control. This might be the most insidious part. Palpatine was terrified of Anakin's potential. He saw what he could do, so while he needed that power, he also needed to put a leash on it. The suit is that leash. It's full of deliberately engineered weaknesses and limitations, all designed to keep Vader powerful enough to be useful, but never powerful enough to challenge his master. The most famous limitation is his vulnerability to Force lightning. Palpatine's signature move, Vader's life support system, his chest panel, all that wiring, it's all exposed and electrical. A direct blast of Sith lightning doesn't just hurt him, it fries his systems, sends him into catastrophic failure, and puts him right on the edge of death. It's the ultimate off switch, and only Palpatine holds it. This isn't an accident, it's a built-in kill switch. But the biggest limitation is to his connection to the Force itself. This is a huge point that often gets missed. The suit severely inhibits Vader's potential. Think back to what we said about Anakin's potential. He was a Saturn V rocket. The suit put that rocket in a box. His connection to the Force is filtered through the constant, screaming static of his own pain. It's muted, dampened. He can't access the same clarity or the same sheer volume of power that he could have as a whole being. He's still unbelievably powerful, sure. He's still stronger than almost anyone else in the galaxy, but he's a fraction of what he should have been. It's like listening to a symphony through a wall. You can hear the music, you can feel the power, but you're missing the full, devastating experience. Palpatine didn't want the full experience. He wanted a controlled explosion. He created the perfect attack dog, fearsome, powerful, but muzzled and chained to its master. The suit also controls his humanity. It dehumanizes him. He can't eat real food. He can't feel the touch of another person. He can't even breathe the air of a room. He exists in a sterile, mechanical, sensory-deprived nightmare. The world is reduced to data on his heads-up display, lifeform readouts, threat assessments, atmospheric analyses. He doesn't experience life. He monitors it. This isolation is another form of control. It cuts him off from anything that might remind him of Anakin Skywalker, of love, of compassion. It keeps him locked in the dark. Now, over the years, Vader does work on the suit. This is a great little detail from the comics and novels. He's constantly tinkering with it, modifying it, trying to gain some small measure of control over his own existence. He makes the limbs stronger, the system slightly more efficient. He even builds a secret meditation chamber where he can take the suit off and exist in a Bacta tank for a short while, which we'll get into in a later part. But the core components, the life support, the fundamental architecture that causes the pain and imposes the limitations, those are hardwired. He can't change them without killing himself. He's stuck. The suit is his life and his tomb. Every time that mask seals with that iconic hiss click, it's not just him putting on a helmet. It's him locking Anakin Skywalker away in a dark box and becoming the monster. The sound of his breathing is the sound of his life support, but it's also the sound of his prison. It's the audio signature of his damnation. So when you look at Darth Vader, you're not looking at a cool villain in black armor. You're looking at a masterpiece of Sith engineering. It is the physical manifestation of Palpatine's philosophy. Everything is a tool to be used. Everything is a source of power to be exploited. And even your greatest apprentice is just another resource to be controlled until he's no longer useful. The suit made Vader a legend, but it also ensured he would never, ever become the true master. Now, let's talk about the weapon. Oh, a Sith Lord needs a weapon. And for a Sith, a lightsaber isn't a tool, it's a statement. It's a symbol of their philosophy, their power, and their hatred. It's a piece of their soul, made manifest in a beam of plasma. And the process of creating one is the exact opposite of the Jedi way. It's not a peaceful meditation, it's a brutal, violent, and deeply personal ritual of domination and murder. They don't construct a lightsaber, they corrupt one. They break it, and then they rebuild it in their own twisted image. This all revolves around the Kyber crystal. Now, we got to understand this, because it's the key to everything. For a Jedi, the Kyber crystal is the heart of the lightsaber. It's a living crystal, deeply attuned to the Force. It's almost like a conscious entity. A Jedi doesn't just walk into a store and buy one. They go on a pilgrimage, a rite of passage. They go to the ice caves of Ilum, or other sacred sites. They don't choose the crystal chooses them. They meditate, they listen to the Force, and they are guided to the crystal that calls to them. It's a partnership, a bond. The crystal wants to be found by them. Then, through calm meditation and focus, the Jedi imbues the crystal with their energy, and the crystal itself focuses and amplifies that energy into the blade. A Jedi's lightsaber is a part of them, an extension of their will in the Force. It's a symbol of peace and defense. The classic blue or green glow, that's the natural color of a crystal, in harmony with a Jedi, singing in tune with the light side. But here's the critical thing. Kyber crystals are inherently good. They're pure. They're creatures of the light side of the Force. They are fundamentally opposed to the dark side. They reject it. They hate it. A Kyber crystal, in the presence of a dark side user, would feel nothing but revulsion. It's like trying to force a wild animal to be your pet. It will fight you every step of the way. So what does a Sith do? They can't walk into the Jedi Temple on Ilum and grab one. The place is guarded, and even if they could, the crystals wouldn't respond to them. They'd be silent, dead stones. A Sith doesn't ask for a partnership. A Sith doesn't believe in partnerships. Their entire philosophy is about domination, about bending the Force to their will through passion, strength, and power. They see the Force not as an ally, but as a tool to be conquered. So a Sith's lightsaber crystal is almost always a trophy. It's a Kyber crystal that has been stolen from a Jedi they've killed. It's a spoil of war, a grim reminder of their victory. It's the ultimate insult, taking the very heart of your enemy's weapon and turning it against them. But here's the problem. A stolen Kyber crystal, even if you physically have it, won't work for a Sith. Remember, it's alive and it's good. It has a will of its own. So the Sith can't just plug it in, they have to break it. They have to dominate it completely. They have to pour so much of their own hatred, pain and rage into the crystal that it literally shatters under the psychic pressure and then reforms, corrupted and enslaved. This process is called bleeding the crystal, and the name is perfect because it's an act of brutal violence. Now let's picture this specifically for Vader. Imagine him, maybe just days or weeks after the events on Mustafar. His mind is a raging storm of pain, loss, betrayal, and self-loathing. He is the embodiment of agony. Palpatine gives him his first mission as a true Sith Lord: forge your weapon. So he would have taken the lightsaber of a Jedi he killed. And this is the darkest part. He takes this crystal, this thing that represents everything he once was and now hates, everything he destroyed. He holds it in his mechanized fist, and he does not ask, he commands. He closes his eyes, and he focuses every single ounce of his pain, the searing, unimaginable agony of being burned alive on the banks of a lava river, the smell of his own burning flesh, the loss of Padme, the one person he did all of this for, gone because of his actions, the betrayal of the Jedi Order, who he believed failed him, the crushing, claustrophobic weight of his suit, a constant reminder of his failure. He gathers all of it, all the rage, all the hatred, all the suffering. He focuses it into a psychic spear point, and he rams it directly into the heart of the crystal. And the crystal fights back. Oh, it fights back hard. It doesn't want this poison. This is an abomination to its very nature. The process is described in the lore as a violent, psychic battle. The Sith pours their darkness in, and the crystal resists with all its might, shining brighter and brighter, pushing back with the power of the light side. It's a war in the palm of his hand. It screams in the Force. It's a scream of purity being defiled. But eventually, it can't take it anymore. The sheer weight of Vader's pain, the ocean of his suffering, is too much. It cracks. You can actually hear it crack audibly. And as it cracks, it bleeds. The pure, clear or blue or green crystal literally darkens, as if filling with blood, turning a deep, horrific crimson red. It's not a natural colour. It's a wound. That iconic red glow, that's the crystal's pain. That's its suffering. That red is the visual representation of its agony. The Sith has effectively murdered its original spirit and created a tortured, enslaved version that now answers only to them. There's also a fascinating and terrifying alternative mentioned in some of the deeper lore. In his earliest days as Vader, still seething in his new suit, he might not have had immediate access to a Jedi lightsaber to steal and bleed. Some stories suggest he was drawn to ancient Sith worlds like Mustafar or Malachor, where the dark side is so strong that it has seeped into the very geology over millennia. On these planets, kyber crystals can naturally fester and grow, already corrupted by the planet's dark side energy, forming what are called synthetic crystals that are naturally red. But even this process isn't easy. It's still an act of domination, just against a different kind of opponent. You're not murdering its spirit, you're overwhelming its inherent fury with your own. Let's talk about Vader's house, because even the most terrifying Dark Lord of the Sith in the galaxy needs a place to kick off his boots, right? Except, of course, Vader doesn't kick off his boots. He doesn't have a cozy apartment on Coruscant. He doesn't have a nice little Sith condo number. He builds his home on the one planet in the entire galaxy that perfectly mirrors his own internal hell: Mustafar. The planet itself is a character here. Mustafar is a volcanic nightmare world. The sky is permanently choked with ash and smoke. Rivers of lava flow across the landscape. The air is toxic. The ground is constantly shaking. It's a place of pure, untamed, chaotic energy. It's pain and anger and destruction given planetary form. It's the last place Anakin Skywalker was whole. It's where he was burned, mutilated, and reborn as something else. So of course, Vader is drawn back there. It's his sacred ground, his monument to his own suffering. He is wallowing in his own pain, and he's building a temple to it. Now, the castle itself. This isn't your grandma's castle with pretty spires and a moat. This is Sith architecture, and Sith architecture has one primary goal: to inspire fear, suffering, and dominance. It's not designed for comfort or beauty. It's designed to intimidate, to crush the spirit, and to channel the dark side. The first thing you notice is its shape. It's a massive, obsidian black spike jutting violently out of the rock like a claw tearing its way up from the planet's core. It's aggressive. It's a middle finger to the sky. It doesn't blend in with the landscape. It dominates it. It says, "I am here, and I have conquered this hell." The design is sharp, angular, and brutal. There are no soft edges, no curves. Everything is hard and threatening. Walking through those halls, you'd feel like the walls themselves are trying to cut you. The interior is just as oppressive. It's all dark, polished stone, stark lighting that creates deep, long shadows, and vast empty spaces that echo with the sound of his mechanical breathing. It's a lonely, miserable place. It's a tomb for a living man. But here's where it gets really interesting. Vader didn't design this place himself. He's a lot of things, but an architect isn't really his main skill set. To build his fortress, he reached back through Sith history and pulled out one of the most bizarre and creatively terrifying figures ever, a Sith Lord named Darth Momin. Momin was an artist, and not just any artist, a sculptor and architect who was utterly obsessed with form and meaning. But he was also a Sith, so his art wasn't creating beauty, it was capturing moments of ultimate transition, usually violent ones. He believed that the moment of a living thing's death created a perfect form, and he wanted to freeze that moment in stone. Yeah, he was a cheerful guy. He was eventually defeated, and his consciousness was trapped inside his own distinct, expressionless mask. A mask that became a Sith relic. Centuries later, Vader finds this mask. He senses the powerful dark side presence within it, the trapped spirit of Darth Momin. And Vader, being Vader, doesn't ask nicely for help. He basically forces Momin's spirit to serve him. He gives Momin a deal. You design and help me build the perfect fortress, a focal point for the dark side, and you might get a new body out of the deal. So this is the wild collaboration. Vader provides the raw, terrifying power and the will. Momin provides the twisted genius, the architectural vision. It's a partnership between a force of nature and a mad artist. Momin's influence is all over the castle. It's a work of art, a dark, horrific, terrifying work of art, but art nonetheless. The way the spires are designed to channel energy, the specific angles of the walls, the layout of the chambers, all of it is calculated to maximize the flow and amplification of the dark side. It's a battery, a lighthouse, and a prison, all in one. And what was Vader doing in this creepy art project? He wasn't brooding and looking at lava. The castle had a few very specific and very dark purposes. First, and most famously, it housed his back-to-meditation chamber. We'll get into this more in a dedicated part, but this was his private sanctum. This is where he could, for brief moments, get out of the suit. He'd be suspended in a tank of healing Bacta fluid, which helped soothe his constant agonizing pain and keep his ravaged body from completely falling apart. But he wasn't only taking a spa day. He used these moments of physical relief to meditate, to dive deep into the dark side, to commune with the Force, without the constant screaming static of his own pain. It was in this chamber that he would have his visions, his dreams of Padme, and where he would plot. Second, the castle was a dark side focal point. Think of it like a Sith version of a Jedi temple. Jedi temples are built on places strong with the light side of the Force, like on Coruscant or on ancient ruins. They're places of peace and clarity. Vader's castle was the opposite. It was built on a site of immense pain and suffering, the place of his own mutilation, and was specifically designed by a Sith architect to amplify those energies. It made Vader stronger. It was his home turf where his connection to the dark side was at its most powerful. Third, and this is the really secret stuff, it was a place for hidden experiments. Vader's ultimate goal, his single driving obsession after Padme's death, was to find a way to cheat death itself. He wanted to bring her back. He wanted to undo his greatest failure. So the castle had labs and secret chambers where he conducted horrific experiments, trying to find a way to manipulate life and death. We're talking about dark side alchemy, trying to create life or reanimate the dead. He was messing with forces that even Palpatine told him were forbidden. He was so consumed by this that he was willing to tear apart the very fabric of reality. There are stories that deep beneath the castle, he had a secret shrine to Padme, a place where he tried to use Sith magic to reach her in the netherworld of the Force. It was all futile, of course, but it shows you the depth of his obsession. Finally, it was a trap. The castle was designed to lure people in. Its power was a beacon in the Force, and Vader knew it would attract his enemies. Jedi survivors, dark side adepts, anyone powerful enough to sense it might be drawn to investigate. And when they came, they would find themselves in a fortress designed by a Sith to maximize his advantage. It was his web, and he was the spider waiting in the center. So, Vader's castle on Mustafar is so much more than a cool-looking evil lair. It's a monument to his pain. It's a collaboration with the ancient Sith artist. It's a dark side battery. It's a laboratory for forbidden experiments. It's a meditation chamber. And it's a trap. It is the physical manifestation of everything Darth Vader is. Powerful, creative, intelligent, tortured, obsessive, and utterly, utterly broken. It's not a home. It's a self-made hell built on the site of his greatest failure, and he chose to live there every single day as a perpetual punishment. He didn't build it despite the hellscape. He built it because it was a hellscape, because that's all he felt he deserved. Okay, so picture this. The Death Star plans are stolen, some backwater planet called Alderaan is causing trouble, and the entire galactic empire is on high alert. And where is the guy in charge of all this military might? The most feared man in the galaxy? He's in his room, taking a bath. No, seriously, this is one of the coolest and most messed up parts of Vader's lore. After a hard day of force-choking, incompetent officers and putting down rebellions, the man needed to unwind, and his methods were unique. It's this weird private cycle that shows you he wasn't a machine. He was a deeply broken guy with a seriously messed up maintenance routine. First up, the Bacta tank. Now let's get deeper, as I already mentioned that in the castle part. You've heard of this stuff, it's like super-powered aloe vera that heals pretty much anything. But for Vader, it was so much more than a medical treatment. Think about what his body actually is. After his duel with Obi-Wan on Mustafar, he was left with virtually no limbs, severe respiratory damage, and nerve endings that were basically fried to a crisp. His skin was a landscape of scar tissue. Every single movement, every breath drawn by his mechanical respirator, sent jolts of agony through him. This constant screaming pain was the engine of his power. The dark side feeds on strong emotion. And what's stronger than a pain that literally never stops? It was a feedback loop. The pain fueled his rage fueled the dark side, and the dark side gave him the power to keep going despite the pain. But even that has its limits. The body, what was left of it, still needed to be maintained, so the Bacta tank was a necessary evil. It was the only thing that could temporarily soothe the burns, regenerate the tissue, just enough to keep him from completely falling apart. And just imagine the psychological toll of that. This is Darth Vader, the Emperor's chief enforcer, the guy who makes Grand Moffs jump out of their skin, having to be completely vulnerable. He'd have to be unplugged from his armor, that iconic suit that was both his prison and his weapon, and lowered into this glowing blue liquid. Only a specific medical droid, like the FX-7 model, was ever allowed to assist. No living being was permitted to see him in that state, ever. It was the biggest secret in the Empire. There's a fantastic moment in the comics that really drives this home. Some rebels, thinking they're clever, actually launch an attack on his castle on Mustafar. They manage to blow a hole right in the wall of his private chamber, shattering his Bacta tank. So picture the scene. Vader is half out of his suit, exposed, dripping with Bacta fluid, his ruined body literally steaming in the open air. He's at his most physically vulnerable. But instead of collapsing, his rage takes over. He uses the Force to literally hold his own body together, manually constricting his damaged lungs and clamping down on his circulatory system. He then proceeds to go out in this horrifying broken state and just obliterates the entire Rebel strike team. It's one of the most hardcore displays of willpower you'll ever see. The man's body is failing him every second of every day, and he just uses his anger to tell biology to take a hike. The Bacta tank was a respite, but his hatred was the real thing keeping him alive. But the real interesting part is what he did while he was recovering. This is where the meditation chamber comes in. Officially, it's called a DX9, but everyone calls it the Iron Maiden because, well, it looks like a creepy metal egg. This thing was his mobile office, his recovery room, and his sanctuary, all in one. It was a mobile life support system that he could dock with his TIE Advanced Fighter, meaning he could basically take his entire creepy routine on the road. He'd get out of the Bacta tank, get hooked back up to his life support systems inside this pod, and then meditate. This is dark side meditation. He'd be surrounded by all these screens and readouts, but he'd close himself off and just dive deep into the ocean of his own pain and hatred. He was communing with the dark side itself, drawing power from it, but also And this is the key part, he was communing with her. Padme. This is maybe the most tragic part of his entire existence post-Mustafar. Even after Padme's death, even after Anakin died on Mustafar, Vader still loved her with all of his heart. And that's absolutely impressive for a man that turned his back on everything he had and everything he loved, but not Padme. That's the only thing he lived and he will live for. That's why he became Vader after all. And not gonna lie, I would have became Vader if I lost her too. He was convinced that the dark side, with its power over life and death, could somehow bring her back, or at least let him speak to her. He had these visions, these dreams where he could almost touch her. The dark side teased him with it, offered him glimpses, but it was always just out of reach. It was a torture he willingly subjected himself to every single day. His meditation was less about finding peace and more about pouring salt in his own wounds because the pain made him stronger. He was addicted to the heartbreak, so he's sitting on top of this wellspring of suffering, bathing in healing goo and trying to Skype call his dead wife in the afterlife. His free time was a special kind of messed up. The job was never really done. Order 66 was efficient, it was brutal, but it wasn't perfect. You can't just flip a switch and delete 1,000 generations of Jedi. A few always slip through the cracks. And for Palpatine, that's an administrative problem. A loose end to be tidied up. For Vader, it's personal, it's everything. Think about it from his perspective. He didn't only join the other side, he murdered his friends, his mentors, and the woman he loved to get here. Every single Jedi that survived is a walking, talking reminder of that choice. They're a living insult. They represent the order that failed him, that cast him out, that he believes betrayed him. They're proof that he couldn't even complete the one task that was supposed to cement his place as a Sith Lord. Hunting them down wasn't his duty, it was his therapy, a really, really violent and destructive form of therapy. It was him trying to convince himself, with every lightsaber strike, that he'd made the right decision. He got his hands dirty. He relished it. The Inquisitors were the cleanup crew, the hounds he let off the leash for the minor leaguers, the Padawans who barely knew how to hold a lightsaber. But when a real Jedi Knight or Master popped up on the radar, when there was a whisper of someone who might actually remember the face of Anakin Skywalker, Vader himself would show up. It was like the boss music suddenly started playing. The door would blast off its hinges, and there he was, a black cloud of doom and that unmistakable breath. He had a few methods, a pattern to his madness. There was a cruelty to it, a theatricality. He'd often isolate them first, cut off their support. He understood the Jedi mind better than anyone, because he used to be one of their best. He knew their weaknesses were their strengths, so maybe he'd have the local Imperial garrison put pressure on a planet, make life so miserable for the civilians that the Jedi would have no choice but to reveal themselves to help. He'd use their compassion against them, the very thing the Jedi Order taught them. To help others, to be selfless, became the trap that sprung shut. He turned their light into a beacon that led him right to them. Let's talk about a specific hunt. This one's a great example of his mindset. A Jedi named Kirak Infilla. This guy wasn't your average Jedi. He was a battle master, a serious piece of work. He'd actually left the Jedi Order before all this went down, following a strict sect that believed in something called the Barash Vow, total detachment from the galaxy. So when Order 66 happened, he was already isolated on a remote world called Al-Dalim, just meditating and living his best detached life. He survived by not even being in the game. The purge meant nothing to him because he'd already purged himself from the Order. Vader couldn't let that stand. A Jedi that powerful, just existing out there, completely free, unacceptable. His existence was a challenge, so Vader goes there himself. First, he goes after what the Jedi is connected to, even in his detachment. He destroys the dam near the Jedi's temple, intentionally flooding the valley below and killing the innocent people the Jedi had, from a distance, sworn to protect. He forces the Jedi to engage. He makes it personal for him. He drags him out of his detachment and into emotional conflict. The ensuing duel is brutal. This Jedi wasn't some pushover. He's a battle master. He actually manages to defeat Vader. I'm talking he gets a clean shot and drives his lightsaber right through Vader's chest plate. He rips out the cybernetic components that keep Vader's heart beating. For a normal man, it's a killing blow. Vader collapses, seemingly dead. But the thing about Vader, the thing that made him a nightmare, you can't kill him. His body is already a tomb. His power doesn't come from a healthy, functioning form. It comes from a pain and rage so deep that it literally sustains him. Lying there, broken, his systems failing. He focuses every ounce of his hatred, every second of the agony he's felt for years, and uses the dark side to jumpstart his own heart. He gets back up, and he turns the Jedi's own philosophy against him. The Jedi's detachment, his lack of fear or anger, made him predictable, almost mechanical in his fighting style. Vader, fueled by pure, unadulterated, screaming rage, is unpredictable. He's a storm. He overwhelms him. That the Jedi way of calm detachment was weak. That his way, the raw emotional power of the dark side, was stronger. He took the Jedi's lightsaber crystal, which is a deeply personal thing for a Jedi, and he bled it, turning it red, making it his own. The hunt wasn't complete until he'd taken something from them. That was a common theme. It wasn't enough to kill them. He had to break them. He had to prove that everything they believed in was a lie. Another heartbreaking example is a Jedi Master named Eth Koth. This guy was a former member of the Jedi Council, a Zabrak, a real big deal. The Empire tracked him down and captured him. And Vader pays him a visit in his cell, but he's not there to interrogate him about rebel bases or any of that. He's there to gloat and to deliver a message. See, Master Koth had managed to do the one thing Vader couldn't. He'd escaped the life. He'd fallen in love, gotten married. His wife had just had a kid. He had found a sliver of the happiness, the domestic peace that was stolen from Anakin Skywalker. And Vader couldn't abide that. The sheer unfairness of it must have been like a poison in his veins. If he couldn't have it, no Jedi could. So he stands there, in this cell, and he reveals that he knows everything. He knows about the wife, the child, and he tells Master Koth to his face that he's not going to kill him. He's going to let him go, but he's going to keep his family. The relief on Koth's face lasts for about half a second before the horror sets in. Vader lets him escape, lets him run off into the galaxy, a free man, but knowing that his wife and newborn daughter are now prisoners of the Empire. He's giving him the same choice he believes he faced on Mustafar, a life of freedom, but at the cost of everything you love. It's a twisted test, and he already knows how it ends. It's psychological torture of the highest order. He's recreating his own trauma in other people just to watch them break. He's proving that nobody gets to be happy. Nobody gets the life he lost. Every hunt was a way to scream into the void. He hunted down and killed practically every Jedi that Anakin Skywalker had ever known, ever fought alongside. It was like he was burning down the library of his own life, book by book. There's a particularly grim story about a group of younglings who survived Order 66, just kids who were hidden away by a brave Jedi. They grew up in secret, and years later, they tried to start a new Jedi Praxium, a new school on a remote moon. They called themselves the Hidden Path. It was a tiny flicker of hope. When Vader found out, it was a slaughter. He wanted to extinguish the very idea that Jedi could ever return. He cornered their teacher, a woman named Verla, and his whole speech to her was designed to crush her spirit. He told her the galaxy had rejected the Jedi, that they were obsolete. And then there were the ones that really hurt, the ones from his old life. The most famous example, of course, is Ashoka Tano, his own apprentice. That's a whole other story we'll get into later. But just think about that for a second. The person he trained, who looked up to him, who was like a little sister to him. He hunted her. He cornered her on a Sith world and tried to kill her. He offered her a chance to join him, but it was an offer made in bad faith. It was a test to see if he could corrupt her too, to prove that his way was the only way. When she refused, the fight was inevitable. You have to wonder, in that moment, was he trying to kill her? Or was he trying to kill the last person in the galaxy who still saw a flicker of good in him? But it's the lesser-known ones that sometimes hit harder. There was a Jedi named Ferren Bar. He was part of a small sloppy rebellion on a backwater planet. Vader shows up, and during the confrontation, Bar, trying to be clever, tries to get in his head. He makes a fatal mistake. He mentions Padme. He says something about how Vader killed her. And Vader freezes. The music would just stop, just for a second. The mask turns, and you can just feel the rage boiling over behind it. It's the one thing you never, ever say to him. It's the raw nerve. Bar thought he was exposing Vader's weakness, but all he did was sign his own death warrant, in the most painful way possible. Vader didn't just kill him, he utterly annihilated him and everyone with him. If there's one thing that defined Vader's early years as a Sith, it was obsession, and nothing haunted him more than Obi-Wan Kenobi. The man who trained him, the man who betrayed him, at least that's how Vader saw it, and the man who left him broken on Mustafar. For Vader, the hunt for Obi-Wan was personal, in a way no other mission ever was. Every failure, every scar, every limitation he carried in that suit, all of it traced back to Kenobi. And so, finding him became almost like a shadow quest that lingered in the background of Vader's life. In the early years, Vader sent Inquisitors and spies out across the galaxy. The official line was that they were hunting all Jedi, but for Vader, there was always one Jedi that mattered more than the rest. Rumors of a hermit on Tatooine would pop up now and then, but Obi-Wan always kept his head down, knowing that one slip could expose Luke. And still, Vader never let go. The search became less about duty and more about obsession. Fast forward to the Disney Kenobi series, and we finally see how deep this obsession ran. When Vader and Obi-Wan met again, it was personal. You could see it in the way Vader dragged Obi-Wan through fire, trying to make him feel the same pain he once felt. That was raw revenge. And then came their second duel in that show, the one where Obi-Wan cracked Vader's mask. That moment was powerful, because it showed the split between Anakin and Vader like never before. You could hear both voices, James Earl Jones and Hayden Christensen, bleeding into each other. He was face to face with his old friend, and when Vader said, "I am not your failure, Obi-Wan. You didn't kill Anakin Skywalker," it was a declaration. Anakin was gone. Vader had fully embraced himself as the monster, and for Obi-Wan, that was closure. He walked away, calling Anakin as Darth this time. To be honest, that was only one moment that carried the whole show, and oh, little Prince's Leia chasing scene, let's not forget about that too. But even after that, Vader's obsession didn't vanish. It carried all the way to the Death Star, when they finally met one last time. Obi-Wan denied it to him by choosing his own death, becoming more powerful as a Force spirit and guiding Luke instead. In Vader's eyes, Obi-Wan slipped away again, just like he always had. That's the key to understanding the Jedi Purge from Vader's point of view. It was an exorcism. He was trying to kill the ghost of Anakin Skywalker by killing every single person who ever knew him. Every Jedi that looked at him and might remember the man underneath had to go. He was building a tomb for his former self, and the headstones were the bodies of his old comrades. He was the galaxy's most efficient ghost hunter, but the ghost he was really trying to kill was his own. And the truly tragic thing? No matter how many Jedi he cut down, that ghost, that memory of the man he was, kept staring back at him from the inside of that black mask. The hunt was endless because the enemy was himself, and that was an enemy he could never, ever defeat. So we've talked about Vader hunting Jedi himself, but the galaxy is a big place, and even the Dark Lord of the Sith can't be everywhere at once. For the smaller threats, the Padawans and the weaker knights who survived, the Emperor created a special team, and you've probably seen them. The guys and gals with the spinny double-bladed lightsabers and the creepy titles. The Grand Inquisitor, the Second Sister, the Fifth Brother. It all sounds very organized, very military, but make no mistake, this wasn't a well-oiled machine. This was a pack of rabid dogs. And Vader? He wasn't their beloved pack leader. He was the guy holding the electrified choke chains. His relationship with them wasn't loyalty or respect. It was built on a foundation of pure, unadulterated terror. First, you have to understand who these Inquisitors were. They weren't Sith. Palpatine would never allow that. The rule of two is absolute. No, these were former Jedi, mostly Padawans or young knights who were captured during Order 66. They weren't turned to the dark side through some philosophical debate. They were broken, tortured. Their spirits were shattered, and then the Empire poured fear and anger into the cracks. They were pathetic in the original sense of the word. They were made to suffer. Their entire existence was one of pain, and the only way they could make that pain stop, even for a second, was to please their masters. And their direct master wasn't the Emperor, it was Vader. Vader hated them. He saw them for what they were, weak, flawed, desperate creatures. They were constant reminders of what he could have become if he hadn't been so strong. They were failures, but they were useful failures. So he used them, and his method of motivation was brutally simple: fear and punishment. He ruled them with what I can only describe as productive cruelty. Every interaction was a test. Every failure was met with a lesson so painful they'd never forget it. He wasn't trying to teach them to be better. He was teaching them to be more afraid of failing him than they were of anything else. Take the Grand Inquisitor, for example. The guy in charge, a former temple guard. You'd think he'd have a little bit of authority, right? Nope. In the comics, there's this perfect moment. The Grand Inquisitor is reporting to Vader, and he's messing up. He's failing to find a particular Jedi, and Vader doesn't yell, he doesn't even move, he just reaches out with the Force, and he crushes the guy's personal TIE fighter, which is just sitting there on the landing pad. He destroys this incredibly expensive piece of military hardware without a second thought, just to make a point. The message was clear: you are failing me. The next thing I crush will be you. Now go, and do not fail again. That was his style. The punishment was never just a Force choke, though that was definitely on the menu. It was psychological. It was designed to humiliate them, to remind them of their place. They were tools, and you don't praise a hammer for hitting a nail, you just use it. And if the hammer breaks, you get a new one. He constantly pitted them against each other. This is classic Sith stuff, right? The strong survive. He'd give overlapping assignments. He'd give vague orders. He'd create situations where the Inquisitors would have to fight each other for the privilege of not being tortured. He encouraged their backstabbing and infighting because it, in his mind, made them stronger. It weeded out the weak. The numbers, ninth sister, sixth brother, they weren't just titles. They were literally a ranking system. And if a higher number killed a lower number, well, that was just natural selection. Vader would just promote the survivor. There's a story about the third sister, Reva. Her whole thing was this burning, obsessive hatred for Vader himself. She wanted to get close to him, to kill him, to avenge the younglings he killed at the Jedi Temple. She was a youngling who survived, by the way. And Vader? He knew. Of course he knew. He could feel her ambition, her hatred, radiating off her, and he let her live. Why? Because that hatred made her aggressive. It made her a better hunter. She was so desperate to prove herself, to get close to him, that she would do absolutely anything, take any risk. She was a useful, motivated tool, and the moment she outlived her usefulness, he disposed of her without a second thought. He stabbed her and just left her for dead, because a broken tool is just scrap metal. That was the other thing. Their lightsabers, those cool spinny ones, they were a symbol of their slavery. The spinning function wasn't for show, it was because most of them weren't powerful enough in the Force to keep a stable blade. The spin generated gyroscopic stability. It was a technological crutch for their weakness. And Vader designed them. He literally built the weapon that defined them, a constant physical reminder that they were inferior to him. He created the system that kept them in their place. He never, ever offered praise. The best they could hope for was not being punished. Success was met with silence. Failure was met with pain. There's a moment where the seventh sister fails him, and as punishment, he doesn't even touch her. He just uses the Force to violently pop the cybernetic eyes out of the head of her droid, leaving it blind and useless. It's a small, specific act of cruelty that says, I can break anything that you care about at any time without even lifting a finger. And he loved to demonstrate his superiority. He'd often show up in the middle of their missions, especially if they were about to capture a big target. He'd just step in, take over, and complete their job for them in front of their faces, just to show them how pathetic their efforts were compared to his power. He'd then often take the credit, leaving them with nothing. It was a constant humiliation. But here's the darkest part of this whole dynamic. For Vader, the Inquisitors were more than hunters. They were practice. They were living training dummies for his own ambitions. See, his ultimate goal was always to overthrow Palpatine. But to do that, he needed to be stronger. He needed to practice. But you can't just go and duel the Emperor every Tuesday. So what do? You find proxies. You find dark side users who are powerful enough to be a challenge, but not so powerful that they can actually kill you. The Inquisitors were perfect for this. He would regularly duel them. He'd test new techniques, new ways of channeling his anger on them. These fights weren't sparring matches. They were brutal, often ending with the Inquisitor seriously injured or even killed. It was a cost of doing business. If the second sister learned a new move and almost took his head off, great, he'd learn from it, then put her in a Bacta tank for a week. If she died, oh well. There were plenty more where she came from. He was using them to sharpen his own blade, and he didn't care if he broke them in the process. They were expendable assets in his personal war against his own master. These Inquisitors, who themselves were terrifying figures who could make star systems tremble, would become like scared children in his presence. They'd stammer, they'd avert their eyes. The Grand Inquisitor, a proud and deadly warrior, would practically curl into a fetal position when Vader entered the room, because they all knew the same truth. Their lives were worth less than nothing to him. They existed only so long as they were useful, and the second a better opportunity came along, or the second they showed a hint of weakness, he would snuff them out without a moment's hesitation. He wasn't their master. He was their doom, temporarily held at bay by their utility. So we've talked about how Vader ruled the Inquisitors with fear, treating them like disposable tools, but there was always a limit to what he could do with them. They were former Jedi, yeah, but they were leftovers. They were damaged goods. Their connection to the Force was a flicker compared to his Inferno. He could use them to hunt Padawans, but to actually challenge the Emperor? To help him overthrow the most powerful Sith Lord in history? They might as well have been throwing rocks at a Star Destroyer. Vader needed something else. Someone else. He needed a true apprentice. But the rule of two was absolute. If he even got a whiff of Vader training someone powerful enough to be a real Sith, it would mean a death sentence for both of them. So he did what Vader always does. He went behind his master's back. He decided to build a secret weapon, a lightsaber he could hide in the dark until the moment was right to plunge it into the Emperor's back. This is where we get into Legends territory, the stories that are no longer part of the official canon timeline, but are way too cool to forget. This is the story of his secret apprentice, a guy whose codename was every 90s kid's favourite username, Starkiller. His real name was Galen Marek, and his origin story is pure Vader. He was the son of two Jedi, Kento and Mali Marek, who'd gone into hiding after Order 66. Vader hunted them down, of course. He confronted Kento Marek. In the ensuing duel, Vader killed him, but he sensed something in the Force, an incredible, raw power coming from nearby. It was Galen, just a little kid who in a burst of fear and anger unleashed a massive Force push that literally brought a tree down on Vader. Now, most people would see a kid who just tried to crush them with a tree as a problem to be eliminated. Vader saw potential, a ridiculous amount of potential. So what does he do? He takes the boy. He doesn't kill him. He brings him back to a secret facility and he begins to train him in the ways of the dark side. From literally the moment he could walk, Galen's life was a never-ending training montage from hell. Vader was his only teacher, his only point of human contact. He raised him in complete isolation, subjecting him to brutal physical and mental trials. He'd pit him against insane monsters, reprogrammed battle droids, and eventually captured Jedi that Vader would bring back specifically for his apprentice to fight and kill. It was constant, relentless conditioning. Vader taught him that compassion was weakness, that attachment was a flaw, that power was the only thing that mattered. He molded this boy in his own image, or at least he tried to. He was creating a mirror of himself, a being of pure rage and power, completely loyal only to Vader. And the scary thing? It worked. Galen, who took the codename Starkiller, became insanely powerful. We're talking about a guy who could yank a Star Destroyer out of the sky with the Force. His power was so raw, so untamed, that it dwarfed what most Jedi Masters could ever hope to achieve. Vader had succeeded. He had created the perfect weapon. But here's the thing about creating a living weapon. It develops a mind of its own. Despite Vader's best efforts to beat it out of him, little flickers of the boy he once was, Galen Marek, started to come back. He had a connection with a pilot droid he rebuilt, Proxy. Proxy was programmed to constantly try to assassinate him, another one of Vader's brutal training methods. But Starkiller treated him almost like a friend. He started to question things. He wasn't just a mindless attack dog. Vader's plan was always the same: use Starkiller to help him kill the Emperor. But he needed to test him, so he started sending him on real missions. His first big mission was to track down and kill the Jedi Master, Ram Kota. Kota was a grizzled old veteran who had become disillusioned with the Jedi Order even before the Purge. He'd formed his own militia and was being a general nuisance to the Empire. Starkiller finds him. They have an epic duel, and Starkiller wins. He defeats Kota and leaves him for dead. Mission accomplished. Vader is pleased. His weapon is working, but this is where the first crack appears. Kota isn't killed, he's blinded, but he survives. And more importantly, the mission exposed Starkiller to the wider galaxy. He saw the oppression of the Empire firsthand. He saw that there were people, like Kota's militia, who were willing to fight back. The black and white world Vader had taught him, that the Empire was order and everyone else was chaos, started to get a little grey. Vader, sensing this hesitation, decided it was time for the ultimate test of loyalty. He told Starkiller that the Emperor had discovered his existence and that they had to move now. Their plan was to assemble a group of Palpatine's enemies, the biggest threats in the galaxy, to form a distraction while they stormed the throne room. This is where the story gets really interesting. Starkiller goes out and he does it. He tracks down these major figures. He finds Leia Organa, though he doesn't know who she really is. He finds the smuggler Han Solo and Chewbacca. He even finds the now-blind Ram Kota and convinces him to help. He forges these unlikely people into the very first foundation of the Rebel Alliance. Literally. The symbol of the Alliance? That's the Marek family crest. Starkiller gave it to them. Think about the irony there. Darth Vader's secret apprentice, a Sith assassin, is indirectly responsible for creating the Rebel Alliance. He's the one who brought all the key players together. Vader's weapon was so effective, it accidentally built the very thing that would eventually destroy the Empire. So, the day arrives. The Emperor is on the Death Star. Starkiller and Vader arrive, ready to face him. The rebels cause their distraction outside, and the two of them walk into the throne room. And then, Vader betrays him. Of course he does. It's the most Sith thing imaginable. The moment they stand before the Emperor, Vader ignites his lightsaber and cuts down his own apprentice. He just cuts him down without a second thought. It was all a setup. Vader never intended for Starkiller to help him kill the Emperor. That was the test. The entire mission, from the very beginning, was a loyalty test, orchestrated by Palpatine himself. The Emperor knew about Starkiller all along. He told Vader to bring his apprentice before him, so he could see this weapon for himself. And Vader, to prove his ultimate loyalty to the Emperor, to show that his weapon was just a tool and not a real rival, killed him on the spot. The message was clear. See, my master, I have no other loyalties. I will even destroy my greatest creation for you. But the story doesn't end there, because Starkiller didn't die. His connection to the Force was so strong that he fell into a state of suspended animation. The rebels recovered his body, and Kota, along with a medical droid, brought him back. He was rebuilt, quite literally. And this is where he truly broke free from Vader's shadow. Brought back from the brink, he rejected the dark side. He wasn't Vader's weapon anymore. He wasn't Starkiller. He was Galen Marek again. He dedicated himself to the Rebel Alliance he accidentally helped create. The final act of this drama sees the Emperor capturing the rebel leaders. He's on a planet called Camino, at a secret cloning facility. He's about to execute them all. Galen shows up for one last confrontation with his master. He fights his way through the facility, and he finally faces Vader. And this time, it's different. He's not fighting with rage, he's fighting with purpose, to save his friends, to atone for what he's done. They have an absolutely epic duel in the middle of a cloning tube chamber. And Galen wins. He defeats Darth Vader. He has him at his mercy. He could kill him, but he doesn't. That's the final break. He refuses to be what Vader made him. He spares his life, choosing the light side, and goes to face the Emperor to save the rebels. He sacrifices himself to give Leia, Kota, and the others time to escape, ultimately dying at the Emperor's hands. But in doing so, he completely and utterly defeats Vader's plan. Vader's perfect weapon, his secret apprentice. He chose compassion over power. He chose to save others rather than rule them. He became everything Vader had tried to beat out of him. In the end, Vader's greatest creation was his most spectacular failure. He tried to build a darker version of himself, but instead, he accidentally recreated Anakin Skywalker, a hero who sacrificed everything to save others. And that had to be the most painful lesson of all for the Dark Lord. The relationship between Darth Sidious and Darth Vader is the most masterfully toxic boss-employee dynamic you could possibly imagine. Forget your bad job with the micromanaging manager. This is on a whole other level. This is a constant, brutal psychological and physical war fought across 2 decades, hidden behind the closed doors of the throne room. It's a dance of betrayal where both partners are waiting for the other to miss a step. From the very second Anakin Skywalker died on the shores of Mustafar, Vader was trapped, and Sidious made sure he never, ever forgot it. The suit was a physical prison, but the real cage was built in his mind. Sidious was a master architect of dependency. He engineered a reality where Vader believed he had nowhere else to go, no other purpose. He was a master of the long game, of psychological manipulation, so subtle and so deep that Vader often didn't even realize he was being played in the beginning. The primary tool in Sidious's arsenal was the carrot and the stick, but the carrot was always a lie, and the stick was a lightning bolt. He constantly dangled the promise of true power. He'd speak in grandiose terms about their grand design, about how they would rule the galaxy together, as true master and apprentice, ushering in a new age of the Sith. He'd give Vader just enough authority to feel powerful. Command of fleets, legions of stormtroopers, the fear of the entire Imperial military, but it was always alone. It could be revoked in an instant with a flick of the wrist and a surge of blue lightning. And that was the other tool: constant brutal punishment. Vader fails a mission, disappoints his master, he'd unleash a torrent of Sith lightning to torture him. He'd electrocute him until the suit was smoking, until Vader was writhing on the floor in unimaginable agony, his system short-circuiting. It was a torture so severe it would leave him crippled and needing days in a Bacta tank to recover. The message was this: your pain is my tool. Your suffering is my reminder of who holds the power. But the most insidious manipulations were the psychological ones. Sidious was a grandmaster of gaslighting. He systematically worked to destroy Vader's sense of self-worth. He constantly reminded Vader that he was more machine now than man, that his potential had been capped on Mustafar, that he would never be as powerful as he could have been. He'd compare him unfavorably to other potential apprentices. He'd hint that he was replaceable. He kept Vader in a state of perpetual insecurity, making him hungry for more power, but always convinced he was too weak to actually take it. He made Vader feel like a damaged product, forever trying to earn the approval of the very man who broke him. And he'd always use Vader's past against him. He'd subtly, or not so subtly, bring up Padme. He'd twist the knife, reminding Vader that his turn to the dark side was all for nothing, that he killed the woman he loved because of his own weakness. He'd stoke that guilt and anger because it made Vader more powerful in the Force, and therefore more useful to him. He was literally using Vader's heartbreak as a battery. He'd created the wound, and now he was mining it for energy. But Vader wasn't some obedient dog. Oh no, the hatred and ambition Sidious cultivated in him festered. For 20 years, Vader was constantly, secretly, plotting to overthrow his master. The Sith rule of 2 demanded it. His own rage demanded it. The problem was he could never quite pull it off. Every attempt was a spectacular failure, and each failure led to more punishment, more humiliation, tightening the chains even further. It was a brutal cycle. He tried to find apprentices of his own. We talked about Starkiller in the Legends stories, but even in canon, he was always looking for a powerful ally. He considered using the archaeologist Dr. Aphra, a chaotic neutral force of nature. He even, in a moment of pure insanity, briefly considered trying to turn his former apprentice, Ashoka Tano. He was always looking for someone he could use as a weapon against Sidious. But Sidious's intelligence network was too vast. He almost always found out, and the punishment was swift and brutal. These potential allies would be eliminated, and Vader would be left with another fresh failure to add to his collection. He hunted for Sith relics and ancient knowledge, searching for some forgotten technique, some secret that would give him an edge over the Emperor. He'd venture into dark side tombs and cursed temples on planets like Exegol and Malachor, facing untold horrors, all for a scrap of power. And sometimes he'd find something, but it was never enough. Sidious's knowledge of the dark side was simply too deep, too ancient. Vader was digging in a sandbox. Sidious owned the entire beach. There's one incredible story from the comics that perfectly captures this twisted dynamic. Vader learns of a powerful dark side entity on a planet called Chandrila. He goes there and finds this ancient prophetic creature that lives in a bog called the Eye of Webbish Bog. It's a weird cosmic horror kind of thing, and it gives Vader a prophecy. It tells him that a day will come when he will ultimately betray his master and rule the galaxy. This is it. This is the sign he's been waiting for. It confirms his destiny. After years of failure, the universe itself is telling him he's right. And then he tells Sidious. Why? Because he's so conditioned to his master's approval, so trapped in the cycle of abuse, that he actually brings this prophecy to him, thinking it will please him, that it will show his commitment to their partnership. He's like a child showing a parent a good grade, hoping for a pat on the head. Sidious's reaction is a masterclass in manipulation. He doesn't get angry. He praises Vader. He says how wise he was to bring this to him, how it shows his growing strength and perception. And then he suggests that they go to this bog together to learn more. When they get there, Sidious immediately attacks and destroys the creature, dismissing its prophecy as the lies and deception of a primitive entity. He then turns to Vader and says something like, "You see, my friend? Only I can guide you. Only I can show you the true path. These other voices will only lead you astray." He took Vader's moment of hope and triumph and twisted it into a lesson in dependency. He made Vader's own destiny seem like a childish fantasy that only he, the wise master, could correct. It's psychologically devastating. And then there were the most direct attempts, the straight-up assassinations. Vader would wait for what he thought was the perfect moment, when Sidious seemed vulnerable or distracted, and he would strike. It never worked, not even close. There's a famous scene. Vader is on his knees before Sidious, who is torturing him with lightning for some failure. And Vader sees his chance. In a split second, he ignites his lightsaber and thrusts it upward with all his strength, aiming to impale the Emperor in a single, sudden move. Sidious stops the lightsaber blade bare inches from his chest. With one hand, he doesn't even flinch. He just holds the burning plasma blade in his grip, completely unharmed, and he looks down at Vader with this look of profound disappointment, like a parent scolding a child for a pathetic attempt at rebellion. He then unleashes his lightning with such raw, unimaginable power that it blows Vader through the window of the throne room, sending him plummeting hundreds of stories down into the junk-filled underworld of Coruscant. He leaves him for dead. That was the power gap between them. Vader's most desperate surprise attack was swatted away like a bug. It was the ultimate humiliation. It wasn't a fight, it was a statement. And that's what this entire rivalry was built on. It was a master constantly reminding his apprentice of his place. Every punishment, every manipulation, every failed betrayal was another brick in the wall of Vader's prison, and for a long, long time it worked. Vader became the perfect enforcer, powerful enough to handle any external threat, but permanently convinced that he was too weak to ever challenge the man who held his leash. He was the galaxy's most powerful servant. The most tragic part? The only thing that ever truly gave Vader a chance wasn't some ancient Sith artifact or a secret apprentice. It was the one thing Sidious couldn't account for, the one variable that didn't fit into his schemes of darkness, the one emotion he could never understand or manipulate, the love of his son. But that's a story for another time. For 20 years, the rivalry was a brutal, one-sided game of cat and mouse, where the mouse was constantly trying to eat the cat, and the cat kept breaking its legs just to show it who was in charge. It was a perfect self-sustaining engine of darkness, and it very nearly lasted forever. So we've talked about Vader's scheming, his personal hunts, his messed up relationship with the Emperor. All of that is the behind-the-scenes stuff, the engine room of his rage. But what happens when that engine is unleashed on the galaxy, on a full-blown large-scale battlefield? This is where the myth of Vader separates from the man in the suit. Because the stories they tell in cantinas and in the corridors of rebel ships, a lot of them are true. The man could single-handedly change the outcome of a war. He was a natural disaster you could point at your enemy. When a crisis hit, the Imperial High Command asked one simple question: where is Lord Vader? His presence was the ultimate strategic asset. Let's start in the cold, airless void of space. Most people think of Jedi and Sith as ground pounders, right? Awesome with a lightsaber, maybe throw around some crates. Their power feels personal, confined to a room or a hallway. Vader? He scaled up. He brought that terrifying personal energy to capital ship warfare, and the results were apocalyptic. There's a famous story from the early days of the Empire, a battle against a cell, of the budding rebel alliance above a planet called Quat. A rebel admiral, a guy named Dod Rancit, thinks he's the cleverest man in the sector. He's studied Imperial tactics. He's lured Vader's flagship, the Devastator, into a perfect trap. He's got a whole fleet positioned in a pincer movement, ready to pound the Star Destroyer from all sides. He's got the tactical advantage, superior numbers at the point of attack. On paper, it's a sure thing. He even hails the Devastator to gloat, to demand Vader's surrender. Vader doesn't even respond to the hail. He sits on his command chair on the bridge, listening to the panic of his crew as reports of hull breaches and failing systems roll in. And then he does something that defies all military logic. He gets up from his command chair, walks calmly to the main viewport, which is already cracked and spider-webbed from nearby explosions. And he steps out into the vacuum of space. Think about that image for a second. The ship is crippled, alarms are blaring, and the commander just walks out into nothing. Without spacesuit or oxygen tank, pure concentrated dark side energy sustaining him. A bubble of hatred making a pocket of life in the void. He floats there, in the utter silence, surrounded by the chaotic ballet of laser fire and exploding fighters. And then he begins. He goes after the big game. He focuses his will, and he uses the Force to physically grab a nearby Rebel CR-90 Corvette, a ship that's 150 meters long, crewed by hundreds of souls. And he throws it. He hurls this massive starship like it's a wrench, using the Force as his arm, smashing it directly into the bridge of Admiral Rancit's flagship. The resulting explosion is catastrophic, a silent flower of fire in the vacuum. In one move, he shattered the entire rebel formation and their morale. The rest of the fleet, seeing their command ship just get obliterated by a guy floating in space like some kind of dark god, completely breaks. Their command structure vanishes. Their will to fight evaporates. The battle was over because one man decided he was done playing Admiral for the day. But space is one thing. Let's talk about ground warfare, where the scale feels more personal, but the stakes are just as high. Let's talk about the time Vader ended a planet-wide rebellion by himself without even drawing his lightsaber. This happened on a planet called Mon Cala. The Mon Calamari, famous shipbuilders, were causing serious problems, pushing for independence. The Imperial Army goes in, but it's a nightmare. Fighting in underwater cities is a logistical hell. It's a brutal, bloody quagmire. The generals are stuck, so they call him in. They need a solution that doesn't involve more troops. Vader arrives. He gets in a specialized submarine, goes down to the deepest, most fortified Mon Calamari command center, and he just walks in. The guards, seeing this black nightmare, appear out of the murky water, open fire. Their blaster bolts fizzle against his armor, or are deflected harmlessly away. He doesn't even fight them. He doesn't need to. He just keeps walking, a relentless, unstoppable force. He's a depth charge of pure fear, sinking straight to the heart of their resistance. He walks through the glowing blue corridors, deflecting blaster bolts, force-choking anyone foolish enough to stand directly in his path. He is there for one person, and one person only, the King of Mon Cala, Li Sha. He doesn't stop until he's in the throne room. He confronts the king. He tells him that every minute the rebellion continues, he will personally locate and execute one of the king's closest advisors, his childhood friends, his family. He will keep going, methodically and without emotion, until the king is utterly alone, and then he will kill him too. The king, a good man who cares for his people, is faced with this utterly ruthless, unstoppable reality. This isn't a soldier he can reason with, or a politician he can bargain with. This is a natural disaster in the shape of a man. He surrenders on the spot. The entire rebellion, fleets, armies, the spirit of a world, it all collapses because one man walked into a room and spoke a few sentences. He won a war with a conversation. He understood that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the ability to destroy an army, but the proven willingness to destroy a soul. And then there are the times where he just indulges, where the anger boils over, and he reminds everyone, including himself, what happens when the last vestige of restraint vanishes. These are the moments that become legends. The stories rebels tell each other to say, "See, I told you so." There's a comic where he's pursuing a Jedi who's hiding on a remote planet. He's frustrated. The trail has gone cold. He's standing in the middle of a vast arid salt plain, the white crystals stretching to the horizon under a red sun. and he just loses his temper for a single, solitary second. He just clenches his fist, and with that one gesture, he unleashes a force shockwave of such immense concentrated power that it ripples out across the entire plane. The ground shatters. Miles of the planet's crust explode upward in a wave of destruction that radiates out from him. He completely terraforms the landscape in a fit of pique. He was annoyed, so he rearranged the geology of a planet. It was a tantrum with the destructive power of a tectonic event. But perhaps the most chilling display isn't one of raw explosive power, but of calculated, effortless, and utterly impersonal dominance. There's a scene on a Star Destroyer. A group of Rebel Special Forces soldiers, highly trained and desperate, actually manages to pull off a daring boarding action. They fight their way to the bridge, they take the crew hostage, they think they've won. They've captured Darth Vader's ship. This will be a propaganda victory for the ages. The doors to the bridge open. Vader walks in. He's probably been meditating in his chamber and is deeply irritated by the interruption. He doesn't even ignite his lightsaber first, he just walks. The rebels, to their credit, are professionals. They open fire. Every single blaster bolt he deflects effortlessly, without even looking. He's reading the data screens on the bridge, assessing the situation, while his lightsaber moves on its own. He's not even aiming, he's just walking, and men are dying with every step he takes. He's a factory of death on an afternoon stroll. He reaches the captain of the boarding party, a man who moments before was a hero. Vader reaches out with his hand. Force chokes him and asks one question: who sent you? The man, terrified and broken, gives up a name. Vader says, "Thank you," breaks his neck, and continues walking off the bridge to go deal with the new target. The entire mutiny is crushed in under 60 seconds. It was an inconvenience, like swatting a fly on his way to a meeting. The sheer, mundane efficiency is what makes it so horrifying. These stories are documented imperial events, mostly from comics. This is what he did when he wasn't brooding in his castle or getting electrocuted by his boss. He was the Empire's ultimate solution, their final argument. When a problem was too big for a fleet, too entrenched for an army, too brave for conventional intimidation, they sent Vader. And he didn't bring an army with him. He was the army. He was a one-man extinction-level event. The rebels feared his proven, demonstrable ability to walk into a room or into a battle and simply decide that the laws of physics and the odds of war no longer applied to him. He was the exception to every rule. And that is why, even when he wasn't there, his presence was the single biggest factor on every battlefield. He was the monster under the bed, and the terrifying thing was, the bed was never enough to hide you. Alright, so picture this. The Galactic Empire is at the peak of its power, right? The rebellion is still just a bunch of annoying gnats buzzing around a Star Destroyer. And Darth Vader, well, he's the man. He's stomping out little fires of rebellion, left and right, and one of these little fires leads him to a dusty old world called Malachor. And this place, man, it's bad news. It's got an ancient Sith superweapon just sitting there, a pyramid dripping with dark side energy. It's the kind of place that gives even the dark side a bad name. So Vader shows up because of course he does. Wherever there's trouble, he's there to pour gasoline on it. And he's there to confront a couple of Jedi who are poking around where they shouldn't be. But he's not the only one who's been drawn to this place. Enter Ashoka Tano. Now, for anyone who needs a quick catch-up, Ashoka Tano was Anakin Skywalker's Padawan. Back in the Clone Wars, she was this fiery, brilliant young kid that he taught. They fought together. They were basically brother and sister. She left the Jedi Order right before everything went to hell, and she was one of the very, very few people who ever got to see the good man Anakin could be, buried under all that arrogance and fear. As far as she knew, he died at the end of the war, murdered by Darth Vader. That's the official story, the tragic end of her master. So on Malachor, these two paths, which have been orbiting each other for years, finally collide. Ahsoka's there, with the rebels, trying to figure out this Sith weapon. Vader shows up to stop them. They have it starts as a conversation. A creepy, filtered conversation through his mask. But Ahsoka's smart, she's clever, and she starts picking up on things. The way he moves, little phrases. The sheer overwhelming presence of him feels weirdly familiar in the worst way possible. There's this amazing moment where she's just staring at him, and you can see the gears turning in her head. The denial, the horror, the sheer impossibility of what she's starting to suspect. And she says it. She just puts it out there. Anakin Skywalker was my master. And Vader, in that cold, mechanical voice, just says, Anakin Skywalker was weak. I destroyed him. And then she delivers one of the most heartbreaking lines in the whole Star Wars saga. She says, then I will avenge his death. And Vader's reply is just, revenge is not the Jedi way. And she comes back with, I am no Jedi. Man, the chills. Because that right there is the whole tragedy in a nutshell. He's the Sith Lord who was a Jedi. And she's the former Jedi who's rejecting the code to face him. Their roles are completely reversed from what they should have been. So then the fight starts. This is brutal. It's two people who know each other's styles intimately trying to kill each other. Ahsoka is incredible. She's fast, she's agile. She uses her two white lightsabers in a form that's totally her own, but you can still see little flashes of Anakin's teaching in there. The aggression, the sheer skill. And Vader, he's a tank. He's not dodging much. He's just taking her hits on his armor, deflecting her blows with raw power, and slowly, methodically overwhelming her. It's like watching a master break down a brilliant student. He's bigger, he's stronger, and he's fueled by a bottomless pit of hate. But the thing that gets me every time, during this whole brutal fight, he's trying to turn her. He says, the Emperor will show you mercy if you tell me where the remaining Jedi can be found. He's offering her a way out, because some tiny, shattered piece of Anakin Skywalker, buried under 1,000,000 tons of pain and darkness, does not want to kill her. The Sith Lord wants a new apprentice, but the man inside just doesn't want to be alone. Ahsoka, of course, tells him to get lost. The fight keeps going, and she actually gets the upper hand for a second. She manages to slash open his helmet, right across the eyepiece, and we see it, a glimpse of what's underneath. A scarred, broken, pale face. And one eye, a sickly, yellow Sith eye staring out. But the other side of the mask is still intact, and from that side we hear it. It's not the Vader voice. The modulator is broken. It's a voice she hasn't heard in over a decade. It's his voice. Anakin's voice. Twisted with pain and hate, but undeniably his. And he says her name. Ahsoka, and the look on her face. All the hope that maybe she was wrong, that maybe it wasn't true, just evaporates. It's him. The hero she looked up to is this thing. It's confirmation of her worst nightmare. And what does Vader do in that moment of vulnerability? He uses it. He taps right back into the dark side and goes on the offensive again. Because the pain of being recognized, of being truly seen by someone from his past, is unbearable to him. He has to destroy the source of that pain. The fight culminates with the ancient Sith temple weapon activating, and the whole place starts to explode and collapse around them. They have one last clash, and Ahsoka manages to strike his mask again, fully revealing the monster within, before the floor gives way and she seemingly falls to her death. Vader stands there, amidst the ruins, and he just limps away. He's wounded, physically from the fight, but you have to believe he's wounded in a way that runs so much deeper. He just extinguished one of the last lights of his former life. He's alone again, right at the last second, through a seriously wild bit of force time travel weirdness involving Ezra Bridger. She was pulled to safety. She survived the encounter, and we see Vader later, walking away from the wreckage of the temple. And he stops, looks down, and he sees the ghost of her white lightsaber lying there in the snow and ash, and he just picks it up, holding it in his hand. This physical reminder of the person he just tried to kill, the person he once cared for more than almost anyone. And in that moment, you have to wonder what's going on behind that mask. Is it triumph? Is it regret? Is it nothing but cold, empty satisfaction? I don't think it's satisfaction. I think that for a split second, holding that saber, Darth Vader was the loneliest being in the entire galaxy. He had successfully destroyed another piece of his past, and all it did was make the prison of his suit feel that much smaller. That duel was the moment the past came knocking on Darth Vader's door, and he answered it with a fist. And it was the moment he proved, once and for all, to himself and to the one person who might have still had hope for him, that Anakin Skywalker was truly gone. Except, we know he wasn't. Not completely. And that tiny lingering conflict is what makes the next parts of his story so fascinating. Because the fight with Ahsoka was a tragedy, but it was also a crack in the armor. And cracks, as we'll see, have a way of getting bigger. That fight with Ahsoka, as brutal as it was, didn't seal the darkness in. It let a little light leak out, And that light, that tiny annoying flicker of Anakin, is about to get a name. A target, Luke Skywalker. Now everyone knows the big moments from the films. I am your father, iconic stuff. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the time between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi wasn't a quiet gap. It was a wild, messy period where Vader and Luke were basically playing an insane game of cat and mouse across the galaxy. And Vader was a very, very conflicted cat. See, after Cloud City, Vader doesn't go back to business as usual. He's got a new mission, a personal one. He's obsessed. He's trying to find his son. He wants to turn him, to bring him to his side, to rule the galaxy together as father and son. It's a family business proposal from the world's worst dad, and this leads to some absolutely incredible confrontations in the comics and novels that we never got to see on screen. This is the hidden lore that adds so much depth to that final choice he makes in Return of the Jedi. One of the best ones happens on a planet called Vendaxa. It's a jungle world full of these huge prehistoric monsters, real Jurassic Park vibes. Luke is there on a mission, and Vader catches his scent. He shows up, and the hunt is on. But it's not just Vader stomping through the jungle, he's talking. He's using the Force to project his voice to Luke, messing with his head. He's trying to teach him. He says stuff like, "The fear of this place. It is a tool. Use it. Feel the life around you, the chaos. The dark side is in all living things. Let it flow through you." It's like the world's worst, most terrifying parenting advice. He's trying to be a mentor, but his idea of a lesson is throwing his son into a monster-infested jungle and then showing up to beat him up. At one point, Luke gets cornered by this giant monster, and Vader just force chokes the monster to save Luke. It's this moment of paternal instinct wrapped in absolute horror. Nobody gets to kill my son but me. The duel they have is raw. Luke is more skilled than he was on Cloud City, but he's still nowhere near Vader's level. Vader is toying with him, testing him. He's analysing every move, seeing how much his son has learned. He's proud, in his own twisted, Sith Lord way. He even compliments him at one point, in that backhanded Vader fashion. "You have learned much since our last meeting, but you remain unrefined." The whole encounter ends with Luke managing to escape, but not before Vader leaves a lasting impression. He messes with him, psychologically. He makes it clear that he can find him anywhere, that running is useless, but he also makes the offer again. "Join me." Here's where it gets really interesting. There's another encounter, this one on a moon called K-43. This one is less of a duel and more of a shared moment. Luke's X-Wing gets shot down and crashes. Vader's TIE Advanced gets shot down and crashes. They both end up stranded in the same snowy wilderness, and they have to work together to survive. I'm not kidding. They're attacked by these native predators, and for a brief, surreal moment, it's father and son back to back, lightsabers lit, fighting off a pack of alien wolves. And in that moment, you have to wonder what's going through Vader's head. Is this a glimpse of what could be? A partnership? A son he can actually fight alongside instead of against? It doesn't last, of course. As soon as the immediate threat is gone, they're back to trying to capture each other. But that moment of forced cooperation, it leaves a mark. It shows that there is a possibility of something other than conflict between them. It's a seed planted in Vader's mind. Perhaps the most significant of these hidden duels happens on a planet called Jabiim. This is a place with serious history for Anakin Skywalker. It's where he lost a lot of friends during the Clone Wars. The place is already a ghost for him. Luke is there, helping a group of refugees escape. Vader shows up to stop them. Their fight is brutal, and it takes them right into a hangar bay with a functioning ship. This is it. This is Vader's chance to end it, to capture Luke and take him to the Emperor. He's got Luke on the ropes, and in a moment of desperation, Luke does the only thing he can think of. He reaches out with the Force, but not to attack. He reaches into Vader's mind, and he doesn't see the monster. He doesn't see the Dark Lord. He sees his father, Anakin Skywalker. He sees his face twisted in pain, trapped behind the mask. He feels his conflict, his agony, the war inside him, and he says it. He just says father. And Vader freezes. The word hits him like a physical blow. Luke isn't fighting him anymore. He's not rejecting him. He's acknowledging him. He's seeing the man behind the mask that Vader has spent 2 decades building. It completely unravels Vader. He stumbles back. He's confused, vulnerable. For a second, he's not Darth Vader. he's just a man exposed. Luke uses that moment of shock to escape, but the damage is done. The psychological damage. Vader is left alone in that hangar, and he's furious, but he's not furious at Luke. He's furious at himself, for his weakness, for that moment of hesitation. He unleashes his rage on the empty hangar, destroying everything around him with the Force. This encounter is a total game changer. Before this, Vader's plan was to turn Luke to the dark side and overthrow the Emperor. It was a Sith power play, but after jabbing, it becomes something more personal, more desperate. He needs Luke to turn. He needs Luke to validate his choices, to tell him that becoming Darth Vader was the right thing to do, that all the pain and suffering meant something. He needs his son to save him from the horrifying realization that his entire life has been a catastrophic mistake. These hidden duels, these off-screen confrontations, they're essential. They show us the gradual erosion of Darth Vader. Every time he meets Luke, a little more of the armor chips away, both literally and figuratively. And with every meeting, the signal gets a little stronger. Vader goes from a confident hunter to a conflicted father. He's a man on a desperate quest for redemption that he doesn't even believe is possible, and he's trying to drag his son down with him. It makes their final meeting on Endor, in the Emperor's throne room, so much more powerful. Because it wasn't the second time they met, it was the climax of a long, painful, and deeply personal campaign between a father and a son who are destined to tear each other apart or save each other. So you've got this guy. The Emperor wants him to be a myth, a legend, a monster from a story. Because men have pasts, men have weaknesses, monsters are just fear. But secrets in the Star Wars galaxy have a way of getting out. They leak. The question of who actually knew that Darth Vader was once Anakin Skywalker is a fascinating web of lies, fear, and a few people who are just too smart for their own good. Let's break it down, starting with the obvious one, the inner circle, the they absolutely knew club. First, Emperor Palpatine. Obviously, he's the one who picked the name. He's the one who found the smouldering pile of failure on Mustafar and decided to stick him in a life support suit. He engineered the whole thing. For him, Vader was his greatest achievement and his greatest tool, a constant reminder that he could break the Chosen One himself. Then there's Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda. Oh, they knew it. They felt it. They felt Anakin's light go out and this massive screaming darkness take its place in the Force. They knew he'd become Vader. They were there for the aftermath. Their entire existence in exile is built around the knowledge of this one, catastrophic failure. Now, this is where the lore gets juicy. Let's talk about Tarkin. Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin, the guy who's so cold he'd blow up a planet to make a point. In the novel Tarkin, which is absolutely canon, it's laid out. Tarkin and Anakin worked together during the Clone Wars. They respected each other. Tarkin was a ruthless strategist. Anakin was a brutally effective weapon. They were kindred spirits. After the rise of the Empire, Tarkin is working closely with Vader, and he starts to notice things, the mannerisms, the sheer, unadulterated skill, the way Vader speaks about the Jedi with a personal vendetta that feels intimate. Tarkin is a brilliant tactician, and he pieces it together. He surmises that Vader and Anakin are one and the same. He never, ever says it out loud. He doesn't confront Vader. He doesn't go telling people. He keeps it to himself. Why? Because it's power. Knowledge is power, and Tarkin understands that knowing this gives him a unique leverage. He can predict Vader. He can work with him more effectively. And he also knows that if he ever uttered it aloud, Vader would probably kill him on the spot. So it becomes this silent understanding between the two most powerful men in the Empire, aside from the Emperor. It's a testament to Tarkin's guts and his brain. The They Found Out the Hard Way Club. This group is a lot less happy to be in the know. Ashoka Tano. We already talked about Malachor. She went from a suspicion to a gut-wrenching confirmation when she cracked his mask open and heard Anakin's voice. She didn't learn it. She felt it in her soul, and it broke her heart. Then there's Captain Rex. Now this is mostly from the expanded universe and the implications of the Ahsoka novel and The Bad Batch. Rex, like all the clones, had his inhibitor chip removed. He didn't participate in Order 66 against the Jedi. He went into hiding. It's all but stated that Ahsoka at some point would have told him. She would have had to. Can you imagine that conversation? Telling your old friend that the brilliant, reckless, loyal general they fought alongside for years, is now the Emperor's chief enforcer? Rex knowing adds another layer of tragedy to the whole saga. The bounty hunters. The It's Just a Paycheck group. This is a fun one. Boba Fett, the best in the business. Boba Fett knew. How? Because he's Boba Fett. It's his job to know things. But more specifically, think about his history. He was just a kid on Geonosis when his father, Jango, was killed by Mace Windu. He was there during the Clone Wars. He saw Anakin Skywalker in action. He's a survivor, and survivors are observant. While it's not explicitly spelled out in a single comic, the lore heavily implies that Fett put it together. He worked with Vader too closely, too often. He saw the obsession with Skywalker, the strange personal quirks. Knowing the identity of his client made him better at his job. It was just another piece of information to be filed away and potentially used as leverage. He didn't care about the tragedy, he cared about the credit chip. Then you've got a newer, awesome addition, Black Chrysanthemum, the Wookiee bounty hunter. In the comics, he ends up working for Vader and later for the Skywalker family on Tatooine. Talk about awkward. It's unlikely he knew the full story, but he's a smart enough operator to pick up on the strange connections and hatred Vader had for anything related to Tatooine. He probably knew enough to know it was personal. The they suspected but couldn't prove it crowd. This is for the clever folks who saw the cracks but didn't have the whole picture. The Grand Admiral is a tactical genius who understands species, culture, and psychology as a weapon. He studied the Clone Wars extensively. He would have analysed every holo recording of Anakin Skywalker's battles. Then he's assigned to work with Lord Vader. He notices the parallels in their fighting styles immediately. The same unpredictable, aggressive, brilliant tactics. The same sheer, overwhelming effectiveness. Thrawn absolutely suspected, but for him, it was a tactical assessment, not an emotional one. It didn't matter who Vader was. It mattered how he could be predicted and utilised. He would have kept the suspicion to himself to maintain his strategic advantage. A lot of the Inquisitors, the former Jedi hunters, probably had their suspicions. These were often former Jedi or dark side acolytes who were sensitive to the Force. They could feel the immense power radiating from Vader, and many of them would have been around during the Clone Wars. They might have felt a flicker of a familiar presence beneath all that rage and machinery, but to even whisper such a thing was a death sentence, so they buried their suspicions under a mountain of fear. The great irony, the public, and here's the greatest irony of all, the general public of the galaxy had no idea. Zero. The official story was that Anakin Skywalker, the hero with no fear, was a tragic martyr, killed by the Jedi during their attempted coup. Darth Vader was just Darth Vader, a new terrifying enforcer for the new regime. The Empire's propaganda machine made sure of that. To admit Vader was Anakin would be to admit that their hero was actually their biggest monster. It would shatter the narrative. So the two identities remained completely separate in the public consciousness. The galaxy mourned a hero and feared a monster, never knowing they were the same person. That's what makes it so powerful. The secret was known by a handful of people at the very top, either through direct involvement, painful revelation, or brilliant deduction. And almost all of them had a reason to never, ever speak about it. For some, it was too painful. For others, it was too dangerous. And for a select few like Tarkin and Thrawn, it was simply valuable intelligence to be hoarded. It was the worst-kept secret among the most powerful people in the galaxy, and the most successfully buried lie for everyone else. And that tension between those who knew the man and those who only feared the myth is what makes the lore around Vader's identity so incredibly rich. Darth Vader's life was a story of extremes. The rise of a boy from Tatooine who became a galactic hero, the fall of a Jedi Knight into the role of Sith Enforcer, and finally the return of a father who gave everything for his son. His legacy is one of destruction and fear, but also of hope and redemption. Few figures in history have left such a divided memory, and yet it is precisely this contradiction that makes him one of the most fascinating figures in the galaxy. For over 2 decades, the galaxy knew him only as Darth Vader. His black armor, his mechanical breathing, and his presence on the battlefield were symbols of inevitability. Wherever Vader appeared, resistance was crushed. Entire systems submitted without a single blaster shot fired, simply because they knew what he was capable of. His lightsaber strikes were merciless, and his command of the Force left no room for defiance. He was not a man, but a force of nature, the living embodiment of the Empire's will. To the people of the galaxy, Vader's name carried the same weight as the Death Star itself, a symbol of terror impossible to ignore. And yet beneath the armor, there remained a man. For years, Anakin Skywalker was buried so deep within Vader's identity that even he seemed to forget he had once existed. The Jedi Knight who had once fought with compassion, who had loved deeply, and who had believed in the ideals of justice. All of that was lost to anger and regret. But there were cracks. There were moments when that part of him surfaced, fragile and fleeting. The most important of those moments came not on the battlefield, but in relationship with his son. Luke Skywalker saw something that no one else dared to believe. He looked into the face of Darth Vader and claimed to see the man within. Again and again, Luke chose not to fight his father to the death, but to reach him, to remind him of who he once was. In the Emperor's throne room, everything came to a breaking point. When Sidious unleashed his fury on Luke, Vader stood between two worlds. On one side was loyalty to the master he had served for decades. On the other was the last connection to the family he had thought lost forever. For the first time in his life, Vader chose not as a Sith, not as a Jedi, but as a father. The act of lifting Sidious and casting him into the reactor was the rebirth of Anakin Skywalker. That decision destroyed Sidious, shattered the Sith's hold on the galaxy, and cost Vader his life. This final act complicates how history remembers him. For billions across the galaxy, Darth Vader will always be the monster who enforced Imperial rule, hunted the Jedi to extinction, and stood at the side of tyranny. Those scars are too deep to ignore. Planets burned, families shattered, and entire generations lived in fear of his shadow. Yet for Luke and Leia, his legacy was different. He was their father. For Luke especially, the image of Darth Vader was not the final truth. He believed that his father had returned to the light in his final moments. That was why Luke carried Vader's body to Endor's surface, and why he built the funeral pyre not for Darth Vader, but for Anakin Skywalker. In the end, Vader's legacy is neither wholly light nor wholly dark. It is a story of how choices define us, even at the very end. He spent a lifetime causing pain and destruction, but in a single moment, he made a choice that reshaped the fate of the galaxy. Darth Vader was both the monster of the Empire and the man who saved his son. He was both the executioner of the Jedi and the one who destroyed the Sith. He was the shadow and the light.